start off?
Sure. Thank you. First off, thank everybody for taking the time to come. I appreciate that. Thank you, Mayor, for setting up the meeting. We appreciate that. I'm here alone. You can tell all the other island owners are off doing their Christmas activities. And when the mayor and I chatted, we talked about me bringing our attorney, but our main attorney's been tied up in New York at a litigation. And I think maybe it's just as well because, as I've said to the mayor in our conversations about this, we're not at all trying to be adversarial about this. We're really, as we've said at the past town and village meetings, we're approaching this really a matter of fairness and equity. And so we would much rather have a discussion with everybody about this and see if it can be some kind of a solution that at least gets this group of island owners to a position where they feel like there's parity with the other island owners on taxes. So that was the basis of our conversations. And as we've, as I've raised in a couple of the other meetings, we think that if there could be a number of ways to approach this. The real question is there a willingness on the part of the municipalities and the school district to approach the problem? We all feel as if there's really a great disparity between taxes that this small group of islands or property owners pay versus the ones that the other islands pay. Also there's, the lack of services is obvious, and I don't think we need to go into that because we understand there are some reasons for that. But it gets to the point where these islands are difficult to maintain. I think you know that there's probably, of this group, I think there's probably 8 of them for sale. A couple of them have been for sale for quite a while. And it makes it very difficult to sell because one of the first things folks look at is the taxes. So all we're looking at is for some kind of parity really with the other islands. So whether we approach that using a vehicle of a pilot or any other vehicle that anyone can think of, we're open to any of those suggestions.
Okay, I think as far as a willingness goes, I think we're obviously, the whole board, and I'm sure the town would agree, that we're willing to ease anybody's tax burden if we could. I just don't see how, and that was one of the questions, how I don't think that a pilot applies, and I'm sure Mark or Joe could elaborate on that. And I don't see how there would be another way to do it. So I don't think it's necessarily a question of willingness, but how do you, we have a lot of seasonal residents. We have a lot of people that just have vacation homes. I guess that would be the question, how we do that. And we all agree that the pilot isn't,
I'm always happy to be better educated about it, but I've not seen a legislative authorization to change the taxing structure for these islands as long as they remain part of the village. Just like we don't take people who have no children and say you don't have to pay school tax. And we don't, and we don't tell seasonal residents that, you only here half a year, so, we can adjust your taxes accordingly. But, there's a lot of ways you can make distinctions and say certain citizens or groups of citizens get more services than others. That's no doubt true. But it doesn't necessarily equate to a legal method for giving them different tax treatment. And I think it's different tax treatment that you're really looking for, if I'm understanding what you're saying. I'm just not sure how to get there. I don't know, Joe. Do you have Jeff?
I agree with you, Mark. I don't know of any legal mechanism to get there as long as these properties are located within the jurisdictional limits of the village. And from what I understand, Mr. Pietrafesa has to say is that the real issue is equality between their tax treatment and the other islanders. And the only distinction here is where they're located. But that's no difference than property owners on the mainland, whether they're located within the village limits or outside the village limits. Granted, there's service issues that are different there, but I can't see a legal distinction here. And again, as with Mark, if their counsel has some different readings on how we could accomplish this, I'd be more than happy to take a look at it.
I mean, the issue of fairness isn't necessarily a legal question. I mean,
Right.
that's a question for you guys to deal with. I mean, our job as attorneys is to say, is there a methodology to get there? And right at the moment, I at least am having some struggles with it. I mean, we've taken a look at it. You asked me to take a look at it. I took a look at it. But I think we need to get a better idea of the vehicles. I mean, you mentioned Pilot as one vehicle, and then you said others, but I'm not sure what the others are. But we'd have to somehow have a legal basis to get from point A to point B. And I'm just not sure what that is right at the moment. Again, glad to be better educated about it, absolutely. But it's a little bit, it's a little bit of a Pandora's box, because there are probably other groups within your community that can make a claim that they should have a different tax treatment too, for one reason or another. I mean, the one distinction that comes to mind is, I don't have kids in school anymore, why should I pay school tax? All right. Well, because it's for the better good of all of us, that the kids get educated. I mean, we know the reason for that. But there's the potential, at least, for it to open the door to other groups that would come in and suggest that they should get some differential tax treatment based on their circumstances. Right now, the only differential tax treatment that you see are for those things that are outlined in the real property tax law. In the villages, you get village tax, county tax, town tax, school tax. In the town, you get towns, county, school. You don't get village because you're not in the village. Then there's exemptions if you allow them for veterans, senior citizens, and so forth. And those things, there's legislative authorization for all of those distinctions, for giving relief based on those categories. But right at the moment, I'm not aware of a legislative distinction simply because you're an islander as opposed to a mainlander, although it's clear that some services that mainlanders get, you don't. I mean, I don't think anybody's arguing that.
Yes, I think that's really it's not that we're arguing that we're a different class of property owner, but that it's a different class of property. And so, because of that, it is impossible for I guess some of these things are possible. I mean, the school could run a boat to the island for pick up kids. So some of these things are possible and aren't done, and haven't been done for years. Mm-hmm. And others aren't possible. We can't get street lighting and snow plowing, that kind of thing.
Sure.
So I think that's really more the distinction. I'm curious though, Mark.
Yes.
Why do you think a pilot wouldn't work?
Well, pilot arrangements, generally, the ones we see fall with, usually, there has to be a specific legislative authorization for a pilot. Most common ones that we see, and there may be others, but the most common ones we see are ones that are come out of the Industrial Development Agency and are IDA-based loans. Usually it's based on some sort of support for a business entity or enterprise, usually to support jobs and promote economic development. I don't know what the argument is for that for residential. I don't think I've seen a pilot on a residential project, except some of the subsidized ones.
Right, or commercial residential, such as
Commercial
apartment complexes, but,
yeah.
and the mechanism to get to the pilot agreement is to have the ownership of the real property as an exempt agency, and that
Right.
triggers the...
During the period of the pilot, the IDA is technically the owner.
Right.
And that's where the exemption then comes from, and then there's a payment in lieu of tax. There's a couple of other statutes that authorize pilot arrangements. There's one for wind development. There's a couple of different ones that are out there, but they're all based on, as far as I can recall, they're all based on commercial type of development.
Commercial or industrial. Yeah.
Now, again, glad to be better educated, because I'm sure I don't know everything there is to know about pilots. But
Yeah, and I don't want to try and explain it because I'll botch it, and I'm not
Yeah.
attorney. But I think our approach it was something along the lines that these islands do represent a significant asset for tourism in the region, and particularly these because of their designation and the way the tour boats call them out and so forth. So that would be justification for commercial use, and we understand that then the titles would have to be put in the name of the IPA for the period of time of the pilot.
Well, I think your first step in that approach then would be to approach the IDA, because you would have to get them to agree that falls within their their policy. They have a uniform tax exempt policy, and as long as the project falls within that policy, they can do a pilot agreement. They don't even need the consent of the taxing jurisdictions. However, if it falls outside of their policy, they need the consent of all the taxing jurisdictions,
Right.
which would be, bring you back here. But
again, you only get there if you get an enabling
Right.
resolution out of them to begin with.
exactly, they have to start the project off. So your selling point on the commercial nature of the properties is, I think, is going to have to start with the IDA. And certainly, if they're on board, they will work with the communities and the local legislative bodies, to see if they can get the consents and all that sort of thing. That's what they're in the business of doing. Without that legislative authority and somehow getting your properties into a tax exempt status, there is no statutory authority to abrogate the procedures under the real property tax laws, basically, that I'm aware of.
I'm assuming you've already looked at the avenue of approaching the assessor and just saying you're assessed on it.
Assessment would be probably the simplest.
We don't direct the assessor, more specifically the village doesn't, because the village technically is not an assessing unit. The assessment's done by the town assessor. But frankly, the town board doesn't have the power to order the town assessor to assess a property a certain way. That's purely within the purview of the assessor. So it's something which you would have to take up with the assessor. And the assessor has somewhat of a higher authority that looks over their shoulder through the State Office of Real Property Tax Services, and they come in and sample the properties to make sure they're assessing at a uniform rate and try to determine what the full value is for property. So the assessor isn't without oversight either, but it's that's potentially, I guess, another avenue, but it's not one that anybody sitting here at this table can control. I don't know, Joe. I can't think of too much else really right offhand.
The only thing these boards can really control is what the tax rate's going to be.
Right, which is based on how many dollars they have to raise to carry out their functions, Then it's applied over taxes, the tax roll based on so much percent. But I think if you want to proceed down these lines, I don't want to be too presumptuous. You know, we really need to start developing a legal basis for how we get from point A to point B, if that's where we're going to go with it. And as I say, I don't pretend to be an expert about this by any means. I think I have some knowledge of it, just like I'm sure Joe does, but we're always happy to be better educated about it.
Yeah, and nor do I. So,
Yeah.
but I do. We have with council talked about the pilot. We do believe that that's a possibility. We recognize that the municipalities would probably have to support that proposal, and that's really why.
Yeah, well, unless it falls within their policy. If it falls within their uniform policy, they don't really need us, but
Right.
I suspect this would fall outside of
I can tell you it does fall outside the policy because their uniform policy is geared towards commercial and industrial, the traditional commercial and industrial property. So it would fall outside and they would need the consent. But I think the very first step, even before these boards could seriously consider the economic impact of it to the municipalities, the JCIDA would have to be on board with the idea. Otherwise, we're spinning our wheels with respect to.
Yeah, it doesn't go anywhere if it doesn't get past the first step.
Understood, but I guess.
And I think for our boards to commit, and I know you're not necessarily asking for a set in stone commitment, but it's hard for the boards to give you a really definitive answer of any type without knowing, as Joe said, what the economic impact of this is. We don't know if it's going to raise the tax rate for other individuals, 10 cents a thousand or $100 a thousand. I mean, we don't know what the impact of it might be.
Well,
because we don't know to what extent you're looking for relief.
We laid that out in meetings with the town and the village.
All right, that's fine.
So the extent was a total of about $103,000, which, to the village and town was about $30,000. Which we
so it's
thought,
103 overall taxing jurisdictions?
103 over all of the properties.
And you thought that broke down 30 to the town, 30 to the village?
Well, if this proposal were that, this assumes that the school board is involved too. So if it broke down, if the fairness reduction was allocated proportionally, it would be about $32,000 for the village, $30,000 for the town, and $41,000 for the school.
All right, so the town part must include county.
It's got to
as well.
include the county.
County, yes.
Okay.
And of course, that could be changed depending on how it worked best with municipalities. But that was the extent of the relief that the property owners were looking for.
Had you thought about the duration of a pilot agreement?
We did. We thought we would try and keep it relatively short. We know that you've talked about actually dissolving the village, and that process is stalled. And I know that we talked about all of it.
We talked about having the study done, but at the time, we had missed a deadline. There was a couple other hurdles that we needed to jump. So that's as far as we've gotten, just talking about having the study done.
Yeah, I know that's a big topic around the state.
Huge.
And we're having it in our area as well. So we thought about it being something like 10 years and having a provision whereby if for some reason the taxing jurisdiction went away, then the pilots would go away.
Well, what would happen, of course, is if the village dissolved, a lot of their functions would be picked up by the town, so the town tax would increase.
Town tax rate's going to increase.
But then we would
You would be spread, it would be equalized.
absorb into what the other items are going.
Right.
And this, again, this extent of a reduction is calculated just to bring us into parity with the islands that are outside of the village. And the thought in spreading it across the 3 or 4 municipalities was that it's a it's a little bit of a hit for each. So we understand everybody's tight and everyone can use every dollar they can get. But if this solves an issue and represents a very small reduction to each municipality, we thought that was a fair way to approach it.
Danielle, you don't happen to know offhand how much the village raises in taxes now? You don't have the budget there, do you?
I don't know if I'm accurate here, but I had that from some records of about $1,160,000.
Yeah, well, I think some of it's, I'm looking at 2011-12 budget, it looks like the real property tax levy is $944,200. In the general fund, anyway. So you're looking at raising taxes to everybody else in the village, based on that, about 3% or maybe a little more to cover the reduction.
The 30,000.
Yeah, well, I mean, if we're raising $944,000 a year in taxes, every $9,444 is 1%.
Right.
So, 3 times that's going to be pretty close to 30,000.
And it's really, we really can't tell the economic impact on the town because you've got the town and the county combined.
Together, yeah.
And, quite frankly, the biggest piece of that town tax that you've got there goes to the county, so, because their rate's the highest rate of the two. So, we can't calculate what the impact would be on the town. It would probably be much less per taxpayer than it is to the.
Well, you've got a larger tax base.
That's right, that's what I mean. But we really, the reason Phil's here obviously is because the county has to come to the table on this as well. And the breakdown on those figures they would have to analyze. Again, the impact to the county, because their base is so large, is going to be much smaller too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I can't speak to the school.
No. Well,
They're showing it.
And I did forward all of this onto the
about
school.
$90,000.
Called Mr. Wagner
41,000.
several times.
I don't know.
$41,000.
I don't know if you want to try and contact him directly. He might have better luck than I do.
My guess is they raise more in taxes than
Oh, they do, I'm sure.
quite a bit more.
Yeah.
So probably percentage-wise, it's smaller.
Yeah, I had that we were a very small percentage of the school.
Yeah, I think so. The school raises more in taxes, so
Yeah, right.
on a percentage basis, it's going to be less. Plus, they have a broader tax base than they do, so they have more heads to spread it across too.
I mean, procedurally, if you were trying to get a good feel for what the local flavor is for this, I mean, these guys are here now sitting because they're willing to listen and talk to you, as I assume Phil's here for the same reason. But at the end of the day, if you did get the IDA to sign on to this, which I quite frankly believe is going to be a big hurdle for you, having worked with them on other projects, certainly welcome to give it a shot. all of the taxing jurisdictions, including Phil's board and the school board, are going to have to be on board too, or it doesn't fly. They have to have 100% participation or it doesn't fly. So,
No, we recognize that, and I guess that's why we wanted to have this.
Yeah, well, and we invited the school tonight, but unfortunately, they were a little bit non-responsive, so I don't know how to take that. I don't know if that's just that they were busy or not interested, or I don't know. It's hard to read anything into it.
Yeah.
I know schools are awful busy this time of year.
Well, I guess I mean, just to lay everything on the table, we're willing to go through that with the IDA and happy to take that approach. If we're going to go through, if we're going to go get the witch's broom and then come back and have everybody oppose us, we'd rather just start the opposition.
Yeah.
Well, I understand.
So I guess that I was trying to come here tonight and have that dialogue and get a feel for, I mean, if we can make something like that work, is everybody open to it? If not, then we'll take a different approach.
Well, and ask the board members that. That's the fairness question.
Well, I think, and I can't speak for everybody, I think that we're willing to entertain anything that you feel is fair, but again, it all boils down to, like Mark had said, the impact that it's going to have on the taxpayers. I don't think that's a decision that anybody's prepared to make right now. I think we're very willing at this point to have a dialogue with you and talk with you and obviously meet, and we're interested in what you're seeking. But I think until we know exactly what we're talking about as far as dollars and cents, I don't think anybody's going to be willing to say, yeah, we support you 100%. But it's at such a premature stage that I personally am willing to say that, yeah, I mean, at this point, whatever you come back to us with, I'm going to be receptive and keep an open mind and listen to it, but I can't speak for everybody. Anybody else want to chime in there? Nobody want to say anything?
I've asked a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
They told me to let them know when there's a public hearing on it.
Yeah.
So that's kind of everybody's answer.
You mean
I've asked people, taxpayers in the
town,
village.
right?
They also asked, what are they doing in Clayton? Is there any islands in Clayton? Are they paying village tax in Clayton? They've asked me a million questions. I ask people all day today. Do you know if there's
I
any?
think, I could be wrong, but I think Washington Island might be the only island within the village limits.
The one that's attached.
That's attached and
Yeah.
receives services. I mean, it's just like being on the mainland.
Yeah, that's it.
I think that's the only one that's in the village limits.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of another village.
Yeah, this is a very unusual situation around the country. What
No,
we
that's not a
have
village.
No,
There's no
that's
village
not-
there, that's a
This is,
town.
which is why it's interesting.
Forest? No, I don't think so.
I don't think so either.
So that is the only one.
Yeah, but I don't think there's any towns downriver that
Yeah, I
have.
don't think so.
I think you're right, this probably is a very unique
Yeah.
circumstance. I do think, though, it would be worth, I mean, I think it would be worth a phone call to the executive director of the IDA from yourself or your attorney, just to float the idea.
Yeah.
Because that's not going to take any more than a phone call
Yeah, I agree.
to talk to him.
I mean, you'd have to sit down and see what it really means for people, but, just very rough math off the top of my head, it's like 3.3 to 3.4% impact on other village taxpayers to fund this. That's, and if you have a budget year where you have other tax increases anyway,
That's what I was just thinking, that's right out of the gate.
it could be a hard sell to taxpayers, I don't know. But, I mean, that's your call, it's not mine.
Yeah.
No, and believe me, I mean, we're probably 12%, anywhere between 9 and 12% of the tax base.
Mhm.
So we can completely appreciate that anything that has to do with this grouping
Sure.
is going to have an impact on the village. And
Right.
as I said from the outset, we don't want to, it's not our objective to hurt the village. And
As
we
board
wouldn't-
members, do you all feel you understand the concept of what they're looking for?
Yes.
They're looking for basically a 31% reduction in what they pay in taxes, but they're spreading that over all the taxing jurisdictions, not just the village, but all the taxing jurisdictions.
Right.
In the end, what it means is they pay the same taxes as if they weren't in the village at all,
Right.
in terms of total taxes.
You know, if you look at the history of these islands, it's kind of interesting too. The Pullman Island, they blew up the Castle Rust house because of taxes back at the turn of the century. Our island, yeah, it's really, it's fun, you know, as you dig into this. Our island was owned by Charles Snelling before there was anything there. And Charles used to graze goats on the island when I was a kid. And I remember the year he tore down the wall. So it had a gorgeous stone wall around it, and he knocked down the wall so that it would be deemed an unimproved island. So now if you look out, I'm not saying that, you know, people are going to blow up their houses now, but if you look at a couple of these islands right now, the two guys that are older and not here, but they're not well kept.
Yeah.
You know, they're not well kept, and they'd be much better off selling. Everyone, all of us would be better off if they sold it to someone who's going to use it and keep it up and maintain it as a tourist attraction. And those are the kinds of things that, you know, these island owners are dealing with now. So again, I'm not saying that people are going to blow up their houses, but there are long-term impacts to this. And
Well, we kind of got, I mean, our board kind of gave an answer as far as willingness. You used the analogy of the witch's broom. I don't know how the town feels about it, the willingness to hear it out.
I'll have to take it back to the town board, get their feelings. I can't speak.
Yeah, I don't think Dale can speak for him, but I mean.
No, but I
it
mean,
has been discussed, and, you know, the town board recognizes that the impact to the town is much less for taxpayers than it is to the village. And I think the town, my reading of where the town board is they kind of following your lead, because you have the biggest impact.
Right.
And that's, if I'm not mistaken, Dale, that's pretty much how they've expressed it, is that, you know, the town board's willing to take the village's lead on it because they recognize it's got the biggest impact on you. And if you're willing to consider it with the impact it has on you, I think the town board is willing to consider it, so.
Exactly, that's how I feel.
And of course, this is just a suggested split. I mean, there's probably a lot of transactions going back and forth between all of you, so that's probably better left, that would be better left to discussion.
Right.
Alex, this was just a suggestion so that we could all take a look at the impossible impact of it.
I mean, Phil, you must have committees at the county that have to look at this, right?
Yeah, and I'm not here. I've been invited here to listen, and the gentleman certainly has a right to request whatever he wants, and I respect that, but, and I'm not going to speak for my board,
Well, you
but
yeah.
I would give it an extremely long shot, just to be totally honest with you. Mr. Alexander, it would have to get by his board, and there is no job creation here, basically. And so the avenue of a pilot, I just don't see it. I just don't see it going. And that's my own personal view, that it's not the vehicle, it's probably not the proper vehicle to use here. And I think everybody wants to afford the gentleman courtesy, and I certainly can empathize with him, but a pilot is about job creation. You have to show
Or retention.
the
But it's gotta-
the retention's a
they're
long
going to want
shot.
to see the direct impact.
Right. People apply for a pilot, you have to say how many people you're going to hire and what salaries are going to be. It's quite a detailed deal. You're free to talk to
Yeah.
Don Alexander, and you know if that's avenue you want to take. Yeah, I'm just giving you the what I've seen on my tenure on the board, that this probably does not warrant
I'm sorry, and that's the,
Jefferson County.
The IDA board.
I'm not on the IDA board. We have representative on the IDA board,
right.
but it's business people, it's community people, and we have a representative there. But when it as Mr. Russell said, as it leaves, if you go outside the parameters, the IDA, if it falls inside the parameters, can pass the pilot themselves without our okay. But the minute it goes outside those parameters, it's a tough road to hoe.
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
tough road to hoe. And you would have to, get out of this room into a larger room and then to a lot larger room where, the school board didn't come tonight. I mean, I think you at least had the opportunity to be heard. And I'm not gonna whitewash it, and I'll tell you
Yeah, no, I appreciate
just what you would have to go through. And, when you talk to this board, they represent several hundred people, then 5,000 people. You go to the county board, they represent 150,000 people. And so your case, while it may be unique here, may not be unique in Henderson or somewhere. I'm just giving examples, and so if it would be fair for you, it'd be fair for a lot of other people. So, and I'm not giving you my opinion tonight. I came as an observer, but you asked me a question, I'm going to give you an answer that without job creation, it'd probably be different if you said on your island you're going to put this structure up and you're going to charge, you're going to hire 3 people and they're going to do that. You might have a start of a case. But without job creation, the idea that's what that vehicle's for. Not not what you may perceive as tax parity. There may be other vehicles that you can look at, but and my statements are not carried by anybody. It's just suggestions that the hurdles that you would have to make. So, I mean that. But you're more than. Yeah, I mean that's the executive director's call and his board.
Right, of the idea.
Right, and I'm not speaking for them. They're their own entity, and they come to all of us with what they're doing, or with their proposals.
Well, I agree. I think it's certainly worth a conversation with them to take their temperature on it and see if that's something they can work through. I think we have some arguments that would bring the school board to the table as well.
Well, like I said, hopefully you have better luck than I did. So that sounds like you're going to walk away with a little bit more homework than I have on this one.
We've done our homework on that. I think we have a way to get them to listen. But we'll see first with the idea.
Yeah, I think it makes sense for you to start there.
Okay.
Have you looked at any other vehicles as far as outside the pilot? Is this your last straw?
No. I mean, well, we have. Pardon me.
I said first.
Yeah. This is our first.
Jumping off
We think
point.
that this kind of thing is where everybody comes together and tries to solve a problem. We think that there are ways to make it fit within that legislation. If not, that assessment would be the second best. And there are some arguments there. As I said, there are some comps that hold up the value of these islands, but they're old and few and far between. And then there's a lot that have been for sale and aren't going anywhere. So I mean, you can argue probably both sides of that argument. And then there's the legal approach, and we all agree that we'd like to avoid that because that impacts the town and the village in particular, and that's not something we.
What would be the legal approach that you're referring to? What would you?
We think that there are 2 parts of the legal. Again, I'm not a lawyer, so I don't want to botch this up. But just to give you an idea, There are two parts to it. One is we think that some acts subsequent to the formation of the village have rendered the reach across the seaway to no longer be valid. That's one approach. The other is that we think that the lack of services provided over the years offers the opportunity for a clawback. So there are two approaches. We have one legal firm who's particularly good at the waterway and seaway stuff, and another that's good at the tax stuff, looking at those.
And the other option was to change reduction in assessment per thousand?
Sure, I mean, that I think everybody would be open to too. And
I would like that too, as a village
I'm sure.
resident. Now, you're Bell Island, right?
Yes,
And you're assessed at what, 850,000?
somewhere. Yeah,
And your island's on the market
it is, yes.
for 1 point, how much million?
1.25.
Right.
And
I think,
not getting a phone call.
right, maybe you ought to make your island in parity with your assessment. You might sell it.
Maybe.
You know,
Yeah.
just a thought. I'm just a taxpayer, just my opinion.
Yeah, no, I completely appreciate lack of services.
Well, I think that we've made some strides here in having a jumping off point, like you and I discussed, that we would hopefully
Yes.
have some direction. And I think that at least we have some direction right now, that we can both walk away from the table and do some legwork.
Yes, and again, I want to express my thanks to everybody for taking the night out and coming over here. I really
Yeah.
appreciate that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I guess we'll just wait to hear from you, or because you're gonna talk to IDA and then you'll let us know.
Yes,
Okay,
I'll do that, and I'll get back to you.
all right.
Okay, good. Thank you,
Perfect.
Darrell. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much. Jim, am I just hitting the stop button?
Yes.